to encourage the media to use the Q&A function. If you tap on it, there's a section where you would open it. Once we answer the questions, it will go into that element. And if you see that your question has been dismissed, it's not because we are refusing to answer the question. It's that we are trying to make the best use of our time and ensure that we answer one question, one topic. So you may have asked the same question as another journalist, just worded slightly differently. Please listen carefully to the content of the responses, because you will find the responses that you're looking for. It won't be practical for us to answer absolutely every single question. If, however, at the end of the session, you feel like there's some information that is lacking and you would still like more, you've got my phone number, you have my email address. Please contact me and we'll make sure that we can facilitate a response to that question for you. I think what we will do now is I'd like to move on to the next section of our program, and that would be to take us through to an official welcome. Our official welcome will be made by one of the vice presidents of the SACC, as well as the General Secretary of the SACC, Bishop Malusi Mpumlwana. I'm handing the platform over now to Reverend Frank Chikane. My apologies. Reverend Frank Chikane is also Vice President of the South African Council of Churches, and he will take us through then in terms of our welcome. Reverend Chikane, over to you.
Well, let me welcome everybody who has joined us, all the church leaders who are with us here, the Presidium of the SACC that's with us, and members of the media who have joined us. This is an important moment for the country and the churches. We are facing a gigantic crisis as a country, and we have to find solutions about these vaccines. And there are people who are doubtful about it. The churches felt it was of vital importance that we look at this matter and speak to the nation about this matter. So I would like to welcome you. This is what we are here about, and the General Secretary will speak to it.
Thank you very much, Reverend Chikane. At this moment, I would like to then hand over to the General Secretary, Bishop Malusi Mpumlwana, who will handle some introductions and let you know exactly who is in the room and the caliber of minds that you have here. Bishop Malusi, over to you.
Yes, I'll hold it. No problem. The volume. Can I put up the volume?
As we wait for Bishop to connect, I'd just like to remind anyone who's just joined the call, kindly please make sure you drop your email address into the comment section if you are a journalist, so that you do not miss out on any of the information. And it is important to let all of you know that this session is being recorded, and a copy of it would be available should there be a need to have a look at it.
Okay, now my notes are on this one.
Are you the first to speak?
No.
Okay, then what we'll do is when somebody else is speaking, we'll switch up.
And my task is to introduce the guests who are in the room. In a moment, the President of the South African Council of Churches, the first C1, will address the business.
But it is important to say that the presentations we're going to do today are presentations that were commissioned by the heads of member churches of the South African Council of Churches, and who set up a special ecumenical theological task team comprising theologians from a broad spectrum of Christian churches affiliated to the South African Council of Churches. And I'll just say, because they are in the room, we have, and this was chaired by Professor Smangaliso Khumalo of the University of KwaZulu-Natal, and it comprised the following: Dr. Vicentia Pabe, Anglican head of the seminary in Makanda; Dr. Louis Kretschmer from the Baptist Convention; Father Spoos Tatu from the Roman Catholic Church; Bishop Ezekiel Matole from Grace Bible Church; Bishop Tami Ngana and Bishop Ned Pomana from the Council of African Independent Churches; Dr. Elijah Mhlanga from the Assemblies of God; Reverend Pumlan Zimande from the Methodist Church; Dr. Daniel Andrew from the Apostolic Faith Mission; Dr. Moses Hobe from the Full Gospel Church; Reverend Lungile Mpecheni, Dr. Mpecheni from the Uniting Presbyterian Church; Dr. Sandy Lengiba from the Evangelical Lutheran Church of Southern Africa; and Professor Rothni Chaka from the Uniting Reformed Church. And that is a range of theologians from a diversity of our traditions that have participated together to advise the heads of member churches of the South African Council of Churches. And I now hand over to and of course we have also in the room some of the heads of member churches. We've got Archbishop Thabo Makgoba of the Anglican Church. We have got Bishop Tembele Sipuka who is the president of the Catholic Bishops Conference. And we have also in the room Pastor George Mashoba, who's the president of the Apostolic Faith Mission. And we have Dr. Peter Watt, who is the head of the Assemblies of God in South Africa. We have Bishop Shadrach Muloi, who is the president of the Council of African Independent Churches. We have got Pastor Mos Ntla, who is the general secretary of the Evangelical Alliance. And so all of these represent the diversity of the churches in the South African Council of Churches that have together commissioned the work that we're presenting today. And I'm asking the president of the Council of Churches, Bishop Zipho Zitlesiwa, to address us briefly.
Bishop Siwa, you have the platform. Bishop Siwa, please unmute your audio so that we can all hear you. We can't hear you yet, Bishop. Kindly unmute your audio.
Yes, I'm muted now. Can you hear me now? Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. My dear friends, colleagues, we are living in unpredictable times, and our foundation of reality in relation to the coronavirus is fickle. Just when we started to entertain a sense of hope, because we have received the first 1 million doses of the AstraZeneca coronavirus vaccine, last night, we were advised that this vaccine is not as effective in South Africa as it has been in other countries because of the mutated variant of the coronavirus in our country. Thankfully, all is not lost in that Johnson & Johnson vaccine appears to offer hope against disease and death. This added to the various falsehoods that have been circulating about the coronavirus vaccines in general and would leave anyone uncertain about our future. However, we believe that a significant part of this uncertainty will be tackled in our media briefing this morning. We have set ourselves a task being to seek the truth about the coronavirus vaccine and set this knowledge against the teaching of our religious beliefs in order to fortify our spirits and strengthen our faith. What will be presented to you today is the product of the best theological minds we have at our disposal. Our intention is to offer knowledge to our member churches and their respective congregants, and indeed the general public. Ours is a ministry of hope. And in the times we live in, the work of the church extends beyond the pulpit. We may not have control over what the future holds. However, we can channel our efforts and resources towards seeking out accurate and authentic information. This is what we have done in the establishment and the work of the Ecumenical Theological Task Team. Work will be presented today.
Thank you very much, Bishop Siwa. We appreciate your introduction. At the moment, I'd like to hand over the platform to the General Secretary of the South African Council of Churches, Bishop Malusi Mpumlwana. As I do that, I would just like to give a reminder to any journalists in the room. If you have not sent your email address, please do so in the comment section now. I'm submitting a document via email to you all that relates to the conversation and the findings Bishop Malusi will share. That's going out right now. Please can I request that if you haven't done so, you would put your email address in the document in the chat section right away. In a few minutes, I'll be handing over to Bishop Malusi, and he will take us through the findings of the Ecumenical Theological Task Team that has been given the job of the day. Bishop Malusi, I will hand over the platform to you.
Thank you, KK. The development of the COVID-19 vaccine.
Sorry, Bishop, please hold on a second.
The development of the COVID-19 vaccine should be viewed as a major milestone in the fight against the coronavirus pandemic. The vaccine represents the best hope to save lives in the midst of the pandemic. It will help protect people who get infected with the virus from becoming sick. And as more people are vaccinated, population-wide immunity develops. Families and communities will be able to gradually return to a more normal routine, thus saving lives and livelihoods. Science is clear at this point that our very best hope is getting as many people as possible to be vaccinated. Nevertheless, we acknowledge the various concerns that have been raised, and the heads of SACC member churches tasked the theologians to offer responses to these concerns. We recognize and appreciate the openness with which South Africans and our congregants have expressed their concerns and even objections to the COVID-19 vaccine. It is healthy for the church to have a dialogue on such matters. People's voices must not be silenced, but they must be heard. As Christians, we believe in freedom of choice. We should not force the vaccine down the throats of our congregations, their membership of, and the standing in the church should not be affected by the decision that they take on the vaccine. The concerns that we have gathered, to which we offer responses, are as follows. The COVID vaccine and the mark of the beast. Some sections of the Christian community have strongly argued that the vaccine is not from God, but is part of what they call the New World Order, governed by the devil, and has 666, the mark of the beast. This comes from Revelation chapter 13, verse 16. Many fear that by taking the vaccine, they will be forced to take the mark of the beast. This association of the vaccine with the beast is based on a wrong and literal interpretation of the book of Revelation, and it ignores its historical context. Biblical scholars agree that Revelation was written to the 7 churches in the first century to address the issue of the Roman imperial cult. Emperor Nero's demand that he be worshipped and is also tied to the worship of the beast's image. If you look at Revelation chapter 13, verses 15, and chapter 20, verse 4. Now, scholars associate the mark of the beast particularly with Nero. This is because when transliterated into Greek, in the Greek language, the sum of the letters of his name results in the number 666. Thus, the use of the number 666 was a coded, hidden reference to Nero used by a persecuted church using an underground language. The emperors, of course, were used to having our own underground language in South Africa when we were a persecuted society under apartheid. In fact, the churches in apartheid days, in the state of emergency, were the places where information about arrests and detentions was spread, again using coded language. So we're familiar with the context of the church using coded language. The emperor's image and his claim to be worshipped were also on coins, the medium of exchange in the local economy. By participating in the local economy, one automatically could be said to take the mark of the beast at the expense of faith in Christ Jesus. And so the taking of the vaccine does not demand any Christian to forsake Jesus, as was the case during Nero's reign. It does not demand complete devotion to anything. For Christians, Jesus is Lord and the source of all creative inspiration in science. And the second one is the 5G and its implications on COVID-19. There have been widespread social media expressions of concern on the suspected link between the 5G technology and the spread of the coronavirus, which led to unfortunate incidents in which community members in Umlazi, Kwamashu, Ntuzuma in KwaZulu-Natal set fire to 5G towers in January of this year, claiming that they were responsible for the spread of COVID-19 through radio waves. We are convinced that viruses cannot travel on radio waves or mobile networks. If anything, let us warmly embrace 5G as it will deliver faster connections and connectivity in our internet age, including advancing in research on future viruses. The third one is coronavirus was made in a lab. It has been claimed that the coronavirus is not an accidental pandemic like other historical pandemics, but was engineered in a laboratory by companies so that they could profiteer through vaccines. That has, however, there's been no credible evidence that the virus was engineered in a lab. Fourth one is vaccine and population control. Another common misconception is that the COVID-19 vaccine is employed by the rich industrialized nations or by a cartel of the richest people in the world under the leadership of Bill Gates, or machinations of the empire to reduce the global population through the elimination of black people. This theory is baseless. COVID-19 does not discriminate, and the numbers tell the story. Currently, there are over 2 million people who have lost their lives worldwide, and a quarter of these is from the global south, and 93,219 from Africa, of which, regrettably, over 45,000 are South African. Every part of the world has their share of the pain. Let us continue to show global solidarity through mutual support and care for one another, as Christ would want us to. A fifth concern is vaccine and the DNA. Another popular circulating mistruth is that the COVID-19 mRNA vaccines will alter one's DNA. It is argued that because the vaccine is a genetic material injected into the body, it could somehow mix in with our own genetic material and change it. the churches are satisfied that the mRNA is not the same as DNA, and it cannot combine with our DNA to change our genetic code. Our understanding is that the mRNA vaccine serves the purpose of teaching and training our bodies to make an immune response toward a particular pathogen. If the pathogen gets into the body, the immune system can then attack it, and that is what the vaccination process is all about. A sixth concern is the allegation that vaccines are made from aborted fetuses. Now, of course, ethical concerns have also been raised, and understandably so, on the production of the COVID-19 vaccine, that the vaccines may have been made from cell lines of aborted fetuses. There is a history of the use of fetal cell lines in the research and development of vaccines for diseases such as hepatitis A, rubella, chickenpox, Ebola, shingles, rabies, and the early portfolio vaccines. As part of that history, some vaccines are said to be present-day derivations of the original scientific research process that developed proteins sourced from a fetus. Although there is no evidence that current vaccines are directly made out of fetal tissue, the connection to cell lines related to fetal tissue in the originating of the technology can pose an ethical question. But in the unavailability of alternative measures to save lives in the current public health crisis, the use of the vaccine is morally justifiable to protect people from the killer disease. We propose a few things for the consideration of the churches and the South African public in general in what we call the way forward. First of all, we're saying we're drawing on the theological concept of humanity as co-creators with God. We started by recognizing the biblical principle that human beings are co-creators with God, as Apostle Paul writes in his first letter to the Corinthians, chapter 3, verse 9. For we are co-workers in God's service. You are God's field, God's building. We have been praying for God's intervention to end the pandemic and for life to return to normal. Christians should view the vaccines as part of the answer to our prayers. Christians should see the Spirit of God at work, not just in the church setting, but in every sphere of life. Any medical discovery that is appropriate that can heal the land should be discerned as a present from God. Let us continue praying for God to give our experts, the scientists whom God has called, to bring healing and end suffering, to continue to give the experts all that is needed to save lives. This is our prayer. The word of God through the prophet Jeremiah speaks to this moment. He says in chapter 29, verse 11, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans for welfare, not for evil, to give you a future and a hope." The second thing we are recommending is the consideration of the sanctity of life. We have lost too many lives due to the pandemic. Also, we have lost much that makes for livelihoods. COVID undermines not only human life through the lonely and desperate death that it visits on individuals and their families. It also occasions havoc on the dignity of the human person as households are plunged into the extremities of poverty and want. Christ instructs us, be merciful, just as your Father is merciful. This compassion of Christ impels us to champion life-giving vaccines against COVID-19. Thirdly, we are saying getting vaccinated against the coronavirus ought to be understood as an act of charity towards other members of our community. Jesus said, "I give you a new commandment, that you love one another. Just as I have loved you, you also should love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another. Thus, being vaccinated should be considered an act of love for our neighbor, Ubuntu. For it ensures that we shall not be the cause of the infection and suffering of your loved ones. It is part of our moral responsibility, indeed, our cultural conviction in South Africa for the common good. I will take the vaccine